The Yukon in deep winter is not simply cold. It is a force with shape and weight. Air so dense it seems to press the spruce flat. So dry it pulls moisture from breath before it can become fog. At night, sound carries farther than it should. A raven's wingbeat can feel loud. And in the low valleys, where cold air sinks and pools under clear skies, the world can settle into temperatures that seize exposed skin in minutes and turn machinery brittle. In late December 2025, parts of the Yukon sat for days at roughly -40 to -50 degrees Celsius, held there by a stubborn high-pressure ridge and clear skies that bleed heat into space night after night. In that silence, a fox lies down. No den door closes, no burrow swallows it whole. Sometimes there is only a shallow hollow scooped into drifted snow, a tight curl of fur and bone, and a tail drawn forward like a blanket. From a distance, it looks like a lump of wind-sculpted white, until the lump breathes. Today we're diving into why foxes choose to freeze into Yukon's deadliest winter. Not as a metaphor, not as folklore, but as biology. The physics of heat, the arithmetic of hunger, and the evolutionary logic behind an animal that can appear to become still in lethal cold, because stillness can be the difference between survival and starvation. The first truth of this place is simple. Winter is an energy crisis. Every warm-blooded animal is a small furnace. The body's core must stay near a narrow temperature range, or proteins misfold, nerves fail, and the machinery of life slows into danger. In the Yukon's interior cold, the gradient between a fox's core and the outside world can be enormous. When heat wants to flow outward, survival is the act of preventing it. So a fox's winter story begins long before the cold arrives, in the architecture of its body. Look closely at an Arctic fox, and you see a theme repeated across many cold-adapted mammals: compactness. A rounded body reduces surface area relative to volume. Shorter legs, a short muzzle, and small ears reduce the amount of tissue exposed to wind and the amount of blood that must be protected from freezing. These are not aesthetic details. They are geometry applied to physiology. But the true masterpiece is fur. Among mammals, Arctic fox fur is often described in the scientific literature as exceptionally insulative. So effective that, within the normal range of natural winter temperatures, the fox does not necessarily need to elevate its metabolic heat production just to maintain its core temperature. The lower critical temperature, the point below which the animal must burn extra energy simply to stay warm, is reported as below -40 degrees Celsius, and likely lower still. In other words, in conditions that can blacken human skin, the fox can remain, physiologically, in a zone where it is not forced into expensive shivering simply by cold alone. This is the first reason foxes can choose to freeze. Because what looks like freezing, lying still in a drift, is often not a loss of heat, so much as an intentional refusal to spend it. The second truth follows: the cold is only half the problem. The other half is food. Winter strips the landscape of easy calories. Birds migrate. Insects vanish. Berries are locked away. So the surviving prey, ptarmigan on the surface, rodents beneath it, and the occasional windfall of carrion are scattered across a huge white geometry where every search costs energy. If you are a fox, movement itself becomes a gamble. Every kilometer walked is heat, lost through pores. Every minute exposed is a metabolic expense, and every hunt can end empty. So foxes use a strategy that is older than the species itself. they turn winter into a budget. In the late autumn, fat becomes more than a reserve. It becomes a plan. Research on Arctic foxes describes substantial seasonal shifts in body fat, high in late autumn, depleted by late winter and spring, evidence of an animal designed to carry part of its future in its own tissues. But fat, even at impressive levels, is not enough to cover an entire winter. It buys time, not certainty. And in a season when starvation is a documented cause of mortality, particularly for younger foxes during low points in prey cycles, time is everything. Now the Yukon's cold snaps gain a new meaning. When temperatures plunge and wind scours the open tundra, hunting becomes harder precisely when energy demands become more unforgiving. And this is where the behavior that looks like surrender, curling up, becoming motionless, reveals itself as something else. An animal choosing to stop paying interest on heat it can't afford to spend. Biologists describe a distinctive curled posture in winter. The fox becomes a compact ball, tucking the legs under the body, placing the head onto the forepaws and drawing the tail forward to cover the muzzle. And this posture minimizes exposed surface area and preferentially exposes the best insulated regions of the body. It is behavioral thermoregulation, posture as insulation, anatomy as shelter. And sometimes the fox goes one step further. It uses snow itself. Snow is not just a hazard. It is an insulator, air trapped in crystalline structure. Arctic foxes are known to seek shelter in dens beneath snow, or to dig snow layers and hollows during bad conditions, reducing wind exposure and shrinking the temperature gradient between body and environment. In the Yukon, where clear skies can deepen cold and wind chill can turn exposed flesh dangerous in minutes, that simple choice, get below the wind, into the insulating layer, can determine whether the night is survivable without burning through precious fat. This is the core theme, stillness as an adaptation to scarcity. But stillness is only one half of the winter equation. The other half is precision. Because even if you can conserve energy, you must eventually eat. So, the narrative shifts from insulation to hunting, into the hidden world beneath the snow. Under winter snowpack, small mammals persist in what ecologists call the subnivean space, tunnels and pockets between snow and ground that remain comparatively stable, because snow buffers temperature swings and blocks wind. Lemmings and voles move there, feeding, reproducing, and leaving faint acoustic signatures, soft rustles, tiny scrapes, inaudible to most human ears. A fox crosses this surface slowly. Then it stops. The fox does something that looks almost like listening with its whole body. Head tilting, subtle shifts, stillness deepening. It is not guessing. It is triangulating. Arctic foxes, like other canids, can hunt prey under snow largely by hearing. They may spend hours roaming, pausing repeatedly to detect and localize the movement of rodents below. When confident, the fox launches into a vertical leap and plunges headfirst into the snow, jaws open, attempting to intercept a moving animal in a tunnel it cannot see. This is mousing, and it is not a cute trick. It is winter's version of surgery, a fast, high-risk movement designed to convert a faint sound into calories. Here, the Yukon's deadliness returns in another form: failure. Mousing can be attempted hundreds of times a day with low success. That means many leaps, many sudden bursts of energy for few meals. So once again, the fox must choose carefully when to spend. The stillness that precedes the pounce is part of this economy. A pause long enough to improve accuracy, because accuracy reduces wasted dives, and wasted dives are wasted heat. Even the skull participates in the story. A 2024 biomechanics study reports that when foxes plunge headfirst into snow, at speeds on the order of a few meters per second, their long, sharp snouts help penetrate with less resistance, reducing impact forces compared with flatter-faced cats. Researchers scanned and 3D printed skulls and tested impacts into snow and water, concluding that fox skull morphology can reduce potentially damaging resistance during snowdiving. In evolutionary terms, this suggests the winter hunt is not only behavior and hearing, but physical design tuned to a peculiar interface. Air to snow, even where the medium can behave like fluid or like solid, depending on its structure. So the fox is not simply enduring winter, it is interacting with it, treating snow as both barrier and tool. Still, none of this fully explains the most haunting image. A fox, seemingly exposed, choosing to lie down in open cold. That behavior makes sense only when you understand how profoundly expensive constant activity would be. In the scientific discussion of Arctic fox winter survival, there is a recurring idea: energy conservation through reduced activity, sheltering behavior, and, under some circumstances, physiological reductions during starvation. Research summarized in Arctic describes evidence that when Arctic foxes are starving, a basal metabolic rate can drop dramatically, on the order of tens of % in some measurements, suggesting an ability to downshift energy expenditure during periods of food shortage. The paper is careful about uncertainty, methods, and sampling matter, but the implication is powerful. When food disappears, the fox may have the capacity not just to wait, but to wait more cheaply. This is not hibernation, not the deep, months-long shutdown of a ground squirrel. It is something more flexible, the ability to shelter, to reduce activity, possibly to reduce metabolic costs during starvation, while remaining alert enough to respond when opportunity returns. The fox's winter life is not a continuous chase. It is a pattern: movement, listening, brief violence, retreat. A rhythm shaped by hunger and cold. So when opportunity does return, often in the form of death. In winter, carcasses are energy islands. A reindeer or caribou that dies in deep cold becomes a reserve that can last days, even weeks, depending on scavenger pressure. Arctic foxes are described as opportunistic feeders and scavengers, taking advantage of large carcasses when available, as well as preying on ptarmigan, hares, lemmings, and even seal pups in some regions. And this flexibility is part of why the species persists across such harsh latitudes. When a windfall appears, fat stores can be replenished rapidly, resetting the winter budget. And if winter provides surplus, foxes do something almost unnervingly human. They store it. Caching, hiding food under stones, in soil, in scree, in dens, appears repeatedly in Arctic fox studies. Some caches are reported to contain remarkable numbers of prey items. The adaptive logic is straightforward. When food is abundant in short pulses, storing calories outside the body supplements fat storage inside it. It is, in effect, a distributed pantry across the landscape. Now, in the Yukon's deadliest cold, freezing becomes the visible tip of a much larger strategy. A fox curls into the snow not because it has given up on life, but because evolution has made movement optional sometimes and made waiting viable. as long as the animal can remain insulated, sheltered, and ready. But the final layer of this story is not only about cold, it is about change. The Arctic is warming, and across the circumpolar north, researchers have documented a shifting boundary between two close relatives, the Arctic fox and the red fox. A synthesis in polar research describes how red foxes can exclude Arctic foxes from dens and resources, and can even kill them, and how red fox expansion into tundra habitats can be driven by both climate warming and by human-related subsidies that provide food and refuge. In other words, winter survival is not just physiology. It is competition, altered landscapes, and new pressures arriving from the south. In the Yukon, this matters because the Arctic fox's advantage has always been the very thing most animals avoid: severe winter. Cold narrows the list of competitors. It punishes large bodies with high food demands. It makes flexibility, insulation, and energy thrift into weapons. But when winters soften, when freeze-thaw cycles become more common, when prey dynamics shift, when new scavengers and competitors arrive, the rules that once favored the Arctic specialist can blur. And that brings us back to the fox lying still in the snow. There is a temptation, watching that stillness, to interpret it as an almost mystical resilience, as if the fox is made of winter. But the science is more sober and more moving than myth. The fox survives because it is constantly negotiating with physics: surface area, insulation, wind, metabolic rate. It survives because it treats hunger like a schedule and movement like an expense. It survives because snow is not only a threat, but a material, something to burrow into, to hunt through, to use as a thermal wall. And yet, even with all this knowledge, the Yukon keeps its secrets. We can measure temperatures and map pressure systems. We can quantify fat reserves and estimate critical thresholds. We can watch foxes hunt with their ears, and we can test skulls against snow in laboratories. But the most difficult questions remain intimate and largely unanswered in the wild. How often does an Arctic fox truly downshift its metabolism during starvation, and for how long? Under what exact conditions does it decide that searching is futile and shelter is better? How does a warming, noisier, more human-influenced north alter the fine-tuned calculus of listening and leaping beneath snow? The camera can linger on a fox in a drift, fur rimed with frost, breath barely visible, the world around it vast and indifferent. In that moment, it is easy to feel we are witnessing a creature that has conquered winter. But winter is not conquered. It is bargained with. And the fox's bargain is written in the oldest language biology knows. Spend less, lose less, wait longer, until the landscape, briefly, offers enough life to continue.